What kind of person demands to tear through your home, your sanctuary, without so much as a shred of respect? The kind who wears a badge of petty power, who thrives on control, who thinks they can bully their way into your life because they've got a clipboard and a title. That's who I faced on a sweltering August afternoon, when the air was thick with heat and the tension was even thicker. My name is Clara, and I've lived in this quiet cul-de-sac for 15 years. My little yellow house a haven of memory as me late husband's garden, my daughter's old swing set, the porch where we'd sip lemonade and laugh. But that day, the HOA, led by Karen Hofstede, decided my home was their playground. They didn't know who they were messing with. It started with a knock, sharp and impatient, like the rap of a gavel. I opened the door to find Karen, all 300 pounds of her, standing there in a garish floral dress that screamed authority. Her face was a mask of smugness, her eyes glinting with the kind of glee you see in someone who loves making others squirm. Behind her stood two men, HOA lackeys in ill-fitting polo shirts, one clutching a clipboard, the other fidgeting with a tape measure. "Clara," Karen said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "We're here for the annual inspection. You got our notice. Let us in." I hadn't received any notice. Not a letter. Not an email. Nothing. But the way she said it, like I was already guilty of some crime, set my blood boiling. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, and said, "No notice. No entry." Simple as that. Her smile faltered, just for a second, but it was enough to know I'd hit a nerve. Karen wasn't used to being told no. She puffed up, her chins wobbling as she launched into a tirade about bylaws, fines, and the good of the community. The men behind her nodded like obedient dogs, but I could see the unease in their eyes. They didn't want to be here any more than I wanted them. I stood my ground, my voice calm but firm. "You're not stepping foot in my house without a warrant or my consent. And you don't have either." That's when Karen's face turned beet red, and she jabbed a manicured finger at me. "You're in violation, Clara. We'll have you fined, evicted even. You don't get to defy the HOA." Evicted? From my own home. The home I'd paid off with years of sweat and tears. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that made her flinch. "Try me," I said, and slammed the door. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. By evening, a certified letter arrived, stuffed with legal jargon and threats of a $500 fine for noncompliance. The HOA claimed my backyard was unsightly, my shed unapproved, and my rosebushism late husband's pride and joy out of code. It was absurd. My yard was pristine, the shed built with permits, the roses a neighborhood gem. But Karen had power, and she wielded it like a sledgehammer. I called my lawyer, Sarah, a sharp woman who'd known my husband and hated bullies as much as I did. She dug into the HOA's records and found something curious. Karen had been skimming dues for years, funneling money into community projects that never materialized. The inspection, a pretext to intimidate anyone who might question her. I wasn't just fighting for my home now. I was fighting for everyone she'd bullied. The twist came when Sarah uncovered a name, Tom, one of the HOA lackeys from that day. He'd been Karen's assistant for years, but he'd kept receipts, literal ones. Emails, bank transfers, even a voice recording of Karen bragging about teaching nosy neighbors a lesson. Tom was scared, but he hated Karen's reign of terror. He agreed to meet me, his hands shaking as he handed over a USB drive. "She's been doing this for years," he whispered. "You're not the first she's targeted." His words hit like a punch. This wasn't just about me. It was about every neighbor who'd been fined, shamed, or pushed out. I felt a fire ignite in my chest, not just for my home, but for all of us. The next morning, I woke to another knock. This time, it was Karen and her goons, plus a sheriff's deputy. My heart sank. The deputy, a young man with tired eyes, looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Karen, however, was in her element, waving a court order like a victory flag. "Clara, this is your last chance. Let us in, or we'll force our way." The men behind her shifted, one holding a camera, the other a toolbox, ready to tear my place apart. I glanced at the deputy, who avoided my gaze. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from rage. I thought of my husband, how he'd fought for this home, how he'd taught me to stand tall. I wasn't letting Karen win. I stepped back, opened the door wide, and said, "Fine. Come in." But as they moved forward, I walked to the hall closet, pulled out my husband's old shotgun, and held it low, not aiming, just making a point. The room froze. Karen's eyes widened, her bravado crumbling. The deputy's hand went to his holster, but I spoke first, my voice steady. "This is my home. You're here on a lie, and I know it. I've got proof Karen's been stealing from the HOA. You want to push this? Go ahead." The deputy hesitated, looking at Karen, who was now pale as a ghost. The lackeys backed toward the door, their tools forgotten. I didn't need to fire a shot. The truth was my weapon, and it hit harder than any bullet. The standoff lasted seconds, but it felt like hours. Karen stammered, trying to regain control, but her words were a jumbled mess. This is assault. She's threatening us." The deputy, calmer now, raised a hand. "Ma'am, put the gun down. Let's talk." I lowered the shotgun, resting it against the wall, but my eyes never left Karen's. I handed the deputy the USB drive Tom had given me. "Listen to this," I said. "Then tell me who's the real threat here." He took it, his expression unreadable, and told everyone to step outside. Karen protested, but the deputy's glare silenced her. For the first time, she looked small, her authority stripped away. That evening, the neighborhood buzzed. Word spread fast. Clara, the quiet widow, had faced down Karen Hofstede with a shotgun and a secret. Neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years knocked on my door, sharing their own stories of Karen's tyranny, fines for kids' chalk drawings, threats over unmowed lawns, even a family forced to sell after endless harassment. The USB drive was a bombshell. Sarah and I sent copies to every household, along with a call to action, a meeting to vote Karen out. The HOA board, spineless as they were, couldn't ignore the evidence. Tom's recordings were damning Karen, laughing about pocketing dues, targeting troublemakers like me, even bribing a contractor to fake violations. The community was done. The meeting was chaos. Over 100 neighbors packed the community center, their voices a mix of anger and hope. Karen arrived, defiant, her floral dress replaced by a severe black blazer, as if she could dress up her sins. She tried to speak, but the crowd drowned her out, demanding answers. Tom stood up, his voice shaking but clear, and told everyone how Karen had manipulated him, how he'd kept quiet out of fear. When Sarah played the recordings, the room erupted. Karen's face crumpled, her empire of fear collapsing. She stormed out, shouting about lawsuits, but no one followed. The board voted unanimously to remove her, and cheers filled the air. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged here again. Karen's downfall was swift. The sheriff's department opened an investigation, and last I heard, she was facing charges for embezzlement. The HOA was restructured, with new leadership who promised transparency. My fines were dropped, my roses deemed exemplary, and my sheds suddenly compliant. But the real victory wasn't the paperwork, it was the neighborhood. People started talking again, sharing coffee on porches, helping with yard work. The swing set in my backyard, rusty from years of neglect, got a fresh coat of paint from a neighbor's kid. We weren't just houses on a street anymore. We were a community. Looking back, I don't regret pulling out that shotgun. It wasn't about violence. It was about standing up, about saying this is my home, my life, and no one gets to take that away. I think of my husband, how he'd smile knowing I fought for what we built. Karen thought she could bully me, but she didn't know my strength, or the strength of a community tired of being pushed around. We're not perfect, but we're free now, and that's enough.